It's a pleasure to be with you. The title of this talk is Basic Negotiating Concepts. There are no disclosures for this presentation. The objectives include understand the definition of negotiation, review the 4 basic negotiation strategies, review the 5 stages of the negotiation process, understand WATNA, BATNA, WAP, and ZOPA and their role in negotiations, and review how bargaining, discussion, and clarification lead to an agreement. So why would we need negotiation skills in public health? This is a quote from a book titled Principles of Negotiation and Influencing. Negotiating and influencing are particularly important skills in public health, as we often lead without authority and are therefore reliant on the success of our behavior and skills in dealing with colleagues within the organizations in which we work and also with external partners. There will be many occasions where we want to influence colleagues or partners to adopt a specific course of action, persuade our peers or stakeholders to take part in joint projects or work with us towards a particular goal or negotiate to secure funds for projects. Public health programs rely on collaborating and partnering with multiple stakeholders. Negotiating skills provide the effective tools to do that. Negotiation is often defined as a bargaining or give and take process between 2 or more parties, each with its own aims, needs, and viewpoints, seeking to discover common ground and reach an agreement to settle a matter of mutual concern or resolve a conflict. Negotiation is not a game, an amusement, or pastime. It is an essential life skill used every day during the interaction of individuals and organizations. There are good and bad negotiation skills. This talk, hopefully, will provide some helpful concepts for successful negotiations. Negotiation is essentially a give and take process seeking appropriate compromise between parties and doesn't end with just an agreement, but results in a sustainable product that benefits all participating entities. As previously mentioned, negotiation skills are essential for public health. Public health is well positioned to facilitate collaborations, partnerships, and coalitions to change risky behaviors and improve the health and wellness of the public. The successful facilitation of these collaborations, partnerships, and coalitions often requires negotiation skills, competencies, and experience. John Paul Getty was an American-British industrialist. He founded the Getty Oil Company, and in 1957, Fortune magazine named him the richest living American. He made the following statement: "You must never try to make all the money that's in a deal. Let the other fellow make some money too, because if you have a reputation for always making all the money, you won't have many deals." This is a key point in successful negotiations. There must be a win for all parties. It's not just about getting what you want. It usually requires compromise that will result in significant mutual benefits. This slide lists some common etiquette for successful negotiations. You'll see these concepts are reflected throughout this talk. First, negotiate amicably. Keep the negotiations friendly and as light as possible. Avoid tension. Smile and use humor in the conversations. A light mood conveys negotiating strength. If you don't convey a do-or-die attitude, it states that you may be ready to move on or walk away since you have other good alternatives. This attitude can also encourage the other party to cooperate more to reach a win-win agreement. Don't see the negotiation as a contest. It should be viewed as a joint effort to solve a problem, providing a win-win for all parties. Don't attack people, but the problem. Don't focus on differences, but common interests. Differences will divide. Finding common interests will move towards a negotiated agreement, improved relationships, and cooperative efforts. Don't search for one right solution. Be creative, flexible, and together search for multiple options. There are essentially 4 major negotiation strategies, including win-win, win-lose, lose-win, and lose-lose. This diagram illustrates the 4 major negotiation strategies and their association with 4 negotiation attributes. The lose-lose box is also called avoidance and is low in all categories and essentially means that negotiations are not desired. In the win-lose and lose-win boxes, there is a winner and a loser. In the win-lose, there's a lot of competition and the strongest wins. Assertiveness and desire for the outcome are high, and to achieve that outcome, there is little concern about relationships and cooperation. In the lose-win box, the loser is over-accommodating, wanting to cooperate and maintain relationships, but sacrificing assertiveness and an outcome that would benefit them. The win-win box is the area John Paul Getty was suggesting as best. This is the area where all attributes are highly demonstrated: relationships, outcomes for all parties, assertiveness, and cooperation. This win-win box is the goal for successful negotiations, providing significant benefits or outcomes for all parties, relies on increased collaborations and partnerships, enhances long-term relationships, trust and respect, and relies on assertiveness skills. This summarizes the 4 main attributes from the previous diagram. Assertiveness is the commitment to honest and open negotiations. Outcome priority is the commitment to achieving a goal. Relationship priority is the commitment to interacting with others in addressing common goals. Cooperation is the commitment to working together toward common goals. This slide lists more detail about assertiveness. Assertiveness is not aggression. The attributes include: stand up for your own or other people's rights in a calm and positive way. Get the point across without upsetting yourself or others. Express thoughts and feelings in a direct, honest, and appropriate way. Be an accurate and honest communicator. Respect the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of others and your own, and therefore assertive negotiators are active listeners. Listen to the views of others and respond appropriately, whether in agreement or not. Try to see things through the eyes of the other party. Encourage others to be open and honest in their views, wishes, and feelings. Be self-confident and therefore accept responsibility and appropriately delegate to others. Have enough strength of ego to admit mistakes and apologize. Exhibit self-control. See themselves as equal to others. Assertiveness requires good interpersonal and communication skills along with self-confidence. This slide defines some additional attributes of win-win and win-lose strategies. Win-win attributes include: define the issue as a mutual problem. All participants must own the problem and solution. Pursue joint outcomes. Every party needs to significantly benefit. find creative agreements that satisfy the groups. This actually defines an adaptive situation where the only solution will be obtained through an effective group process. Use open, honest, and accurate communications. This relates to assertiveness skills that we just discussed. Avoid threats. There is no place for anger, resentment, and frustration in effective negotiations. If that emerges, there is a problem with the process or the facilitator. Flexibility is essential for all parties in effective negotiations. As shown on the previous diagram, the attributes of relationship priority and outcome priority, assertiveness, and cooperation are all high. This list outlines an ideal win-win negotiation strategy. Win-lose attributes include: define the issue as one party will win and one lose. Pursue self-outcomes only versus mutual benefits. Force the opposing group into submission, which fosters competition versus the collaboration of win-win. Use deceitful, inaccurate communications, the opposite of assertiveness. Use threats. Rigidity versus flexibility. Rigidity is associated with entrenchment, no interest in seeking a compromise. It's either a win or lose, no mutual benefit. From the previous diagram, relationship priority and cooperation are low in win-lose. Outcome priority and assertiveness high. Win-lose is not a good negotiating platform. This slide looks at the win-lose negotiator, who is often more an aggressive personality. Aggressive attributes include: rarely praise or appreciate others, puts others down, encourages others to respond with either aggression or passivity. Aggression discourages assertiveness. It can manifest as certain behaviors like rushing someone unnecessarily, telling people what to do rather than asking, ignoring others and their opinions, and not considering the feelings of others. Aggression often creates fear and distress. Aggressive negotiators often use manipulation, which is a form of aggression, making people do something they don't want to do. We've talked about win-win and win-lose. Let's now consider lose-win. Notice the high score on relationship priority and cooperation and low score on the assertiveness and outcome priority scales. This slide lists the attributes of the lose-win negotiation strategy, quite different than the win-lose strategy. This is described as accommodating, passive, or compliant. As per our diagram, relationship priority and cooperation are high, with assertiveness and outcome priority low. These negotiators have a strong need to be liked by others and don't regard themselves as equals. They often lack self-confidence and commonly belittle themselves. They feel inferior to others. Their passivity often fuels further issues with self-esteem and further reduces their self-worth, creating a vicious cycle. They place greater weight on the rights, wishes, and feelings of others and often fail to communicate their thoughts or feelings. They actually are negotiating to lose. They do things they don't want to do just to please others. They allow others to take responsibility, to lead, and make decisions. They are taken advantage of and often manipulated. Unfortunately, it's not always as neat as choosing the win-win box. As shown in the example of this diagram, sometimes a facilitator or negotiator must compromise on the approach based on the 4 attributes and interactions of the negotiating individuals and their organizations, utilizing good judgment to find a successful strategy somewhere in the gray zone, as shown here. In this example, relationships and assertiveness attributes of the negotiators for the participating organizations were not great. The interest in cooperation and outcome were fairly high. This example would likely result in primarily a win-win strategy, but also take on some attributes of win-lose and lose-win. We really want to avoid anything in the lose-lose box, the area where negotiation is not even desired. This slide is a visual of the difference between assertive, passive, and aggressive. Passive would primarily be about you, the other person or organization. Aggressive is all about me and my organization. Assertive is about you and me as equals. There are essentially 5 stages of negotiation, including preparation, setting ground rules, discussion and clarification, bargaining, and agreement, including commitment to action and implementation. The bargaining and discussion and clarification may cycle several times before the parties are ready to close and commit. There are several approaches a facilitator could take in preparing for negotiations. This slide lists some major actions that would likely be helpful. The facilitator may want to assess participants with regards to the 4 major negotiation attributes: assertiveness, interest in cooperation, interest in relationships with the other parties, and how committed they are to a potential outcome. This information would help the facilitator develop a negotiation strategy. Another step in the preparation stage is to assign pre-negotiation work to the participants, including selecting an appropriate negotiator, hopefully one that will be assertive. They also need to identify their BATNA, WATNA, and WAP, which we will describe in the next few slides. Participants also need to consider potential additional concession items that might help reach a negotiated settlement. BATNA stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The WATNA is the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. These should be part of the participants' pre-negotiation work. The BATNA and WATNA describe the best and worst alternatives that don't require an agreement with the other party. Identifying the BATNA and WATNA usually helps parties be better negotiators. Each party will have a unique BATNA and WATNA. Each BATNA and WATNA should be assigned some probability of occurrence, for example, 65%, 35%, etc. Generally, the better the BATNA, the better the bargaining position, though that is not always true. For example, not reaching an agreement may result in a lawsuit, costing time, lawyers' fees, and emotional stress. The WATNA may help determine the walk-away price, or WAP. For example, if the WATNA is better than the current compromise proposal, the party may want to walk away from the negotiation. WAP is the walk-away price, the maximum you will give before walking away from the negotiations. Make it realistic, not too high or too low. If it's always too low, other parties will know that and realize you are a pushover in negotiations and take advantage of you. Keep the WAP to your negotiating team only. It's important that all of those negotiating on your behalf clearly understand what your WAP is. If the other side knows your WAP, that will essentially become your offer. Once a WAP is set, keep it. Otherwise, it's meaningless. Always leave the other party with the idea that you can walk away at any time. Only occasionally should additional unexpected concessions adjust your WAP. The second stage is setting basic ground rules. Common ground rules for negotiations include one person speaks at a time, commitment to listen to one another, try to understand the other's point of view before responding, talk directly with the person with whom there is a concern, avoid side group gossip or alliance building, agree to sincerely try to find a win-win for each party, allow expressions of dissent, respecting the person's opinion, and attack issues and problems, not people. It's also important for the group to describe how an impasse will be addressed, often discussed at the initial meeting. Each negotiation may require adaptation and possible additions to these rules. These ground rules should be reviewed by the facilitator at the beginning of each negotiation meeting and whenever necessary to remind parties of these parameters. Ground rules can be developed during the preparatory phase and will likely need to be discussed and refined during the initial meeting. So the facilitator should work with each side to help them understand the importance of identifying their BATNA, WATNA, and WAP during the preparation time prior to the actual bargaining, discussion, and clarification portion of the process. Their respective WATNAs will help to inform their individual WAPs, which should only be known by their side of the negotiations. The facilitator should not know the WAPs. The WAP may not be the WATNA, but likely will never be worse than the WATNA. The ZOPA is the zone of potential agreement located between the walkaway price of each party. Nothing outside this ZOPA zone will yield an agreement. If there is no overlapping ZOPA, a ZOPA gap, as in this diagram, it can occasionally be created by enlarging the pie, by identifying and adding or expanding the number of values, interests, and concessions to be addressed in the negotiations. These additional values, interests, and concessions are identified during the discussions and clarification phases of the meetings. Fortunately, in most situations, there are more common interests than conflicting ones. So if each party conceals their walkaway price, how can a facilitator or negotiator determine if there is a ZOPA or zone of potential agreement? This is the major role of the discussion and clarification phase of the negotiation process, where the parties explore each other's interests and values with clear communications and thoughtful questions, the role of assertive negotiators. Discussion and clarification may be revisited and expanded as bargaining moves forward. The facilitator should sense and determine when further discussion and clarification is needed. All parties and the facilitator need to keep the goal in mind, a win-win. If after adequate discussion it's clear there is no ZOPA, the zone where the walkaway prices overlap, and no additional values, interests, or concessions will significantly change the situation, then the parties should be ready to walk away from negotiations. This slide illustrates how most bargaining takes place in the negotiation process. Each side starts with extreme positions that are outside the zone of potential agreement. Each side knows its walkaway price, a position known only by their negotiating team. Let's assume from the initial discussion and clarifications, it seems clear to all that there is likely a ZOPA. One side presents an initial offer to start the process. Various offers and counteroffers are then exchanged, implying that each side is near their walkaway price, threatening to leave the negotiation. This is interspersed with discussion and clarifications to move toward a final win-win agreement. Eventually, The facilitator and negotiators sense they are closing in on an agreement and through final compromises reach a win-win for both parties. This talk was meant to introduce participants to some basic negotiating concepts and not be a comprehensive negotiations course. This slide lists some key skill sets for negotiators and facilitators of the negotiating process and include planning, interpersonal, communications, leadership, analytical, negotiation, market knowledge, time management, and research skills. This skill set taps into many disciplines. Interpersonal skills are extremely important, including verbal and nonverbal communications techniques and how to handle emotional situations that commonly arise in the negotiation process, like personal attacks. The latter is defined by others as turning down the heat of a discussion. Two major interventions in response to personal attacks include reinforcing the ground rules and, more importantly, take a break to let people cool down and reset. Influencing others, including assertiveness skills, clear communications, creating rapport, authentic listening, skillful questioning, and building relationships also fall into the interpersonal skill set. The negotiation skill set includes types, strategies, and stages of negotiations. Types of negotiations include distributive and integrative negotiations. Understanding the nuances of WATNA, BATNA, WAP, and ZOPA is important. How to get to win-win and how to reach consensus is essential. How to finally get to a compromise and agreement, complete and seal the deal, is the ultimate goal. We have touched on several of these during this talk, but not in detail. This slide lists 3 books on negotiation that may be helpful if you want more detailed information, including Harvard Business Review on Negotiation and Conflict Resolution, Negotiation, 8 Essential Negotiation Skills to Increase Your Influence and Persuasion by Abby Enix, and Influencing Integrity, Management Skills for Communication and Negotiation by Jean LeBond. In summary, negotiating skills are important for public health leaders. Finding a win-win is the goal for successful negotiations. Negotiators must find the right balance between assertiveness, outcome priority, relationship priority, and cooperation during a negotiation process. Successful negotiations rely on effectively implementing the 5 stages of negotiations. Public health leaders are positioned well to facilitate negotiations regarding important health and wellness issues.
Take your public health practice skills to the next level. Our specialized certificate courses give you an opportunity to work systematically through a public health topic and demonstrate your understanding of that material in a capstone project. Learn more and sign up at ndphtn.com/certificates.